The Science of Meditation. Chapter 18. Narrow and Broad Meditation. In the previous chapter, I explored, through the lens of evolution, why our bodies remain upright during seated meditation, even in deep states, rather than collapsing to one side as they often do when we are truly asleep. A similar question arises when considering Tai Chi. If it, too, is a form of meditation, one in which the body enters a sleep-like state, why don't we fall over while practicing it? Readers often raise this question because I have repeatedly emphasized that we can enter meditation not only by keeping the body still, but also by maintaining a constant speed of movement, whether through uniform linear motion or slow, deliberate movement. Therefore, Tai Chi can be understood as a form of moving meditation, which guides the body into a sleep-like state through slow, continuous motion. Before explaining why we don't fall while practicing Tai Chi, however, it is useful to first introduce a related concept, spontaneous gong. In the Qigong tradition, spontaneous gong, also called Zifa gong, refers to involuntary movements, sounds, or sensations that arise naturally during practice, without deliberate intention or mental planning. This automatic phenomenon occurs when the practitioner enters a deeply relaxed and focused state, allowing internal energy, qi, to flow freely, which often produces natural bodily movements. In other words, these actions are not consciously performed, they are guided by the movement of qi itself. These spontaneous movements can include swaying, spinning, waving the arms, stomping, jumping, or even motions that resemble martial arts or dance. Practitioners may also produce sounds such as shouting, laughing, crying, or chanting. Breathing patterns can become irregular, sometimes rapid, sometimes slow, and may be accompanied by sighs or vocal releases. Sudden laughter or tears are often interpreted as the natural release of emotional blockages. Traditionally, Qigong masters explain spontaneous gong as a natural response to the unblocking of energy channels. As the saying goes, when qi flows, the form follows. From a modern scientific perspective, however, spontaneous gong can be understood as the nervous system's self-regulation during deep relaxation, which potentially involves autosuggestion and subconscious release, as in somatic therapy. In essence, spontaneous gong is a natural expression of body and mind when internal energy is activated. It is neither hallucination nor random movement, but a spontaneous manifestation that arises from a specific psychophysiological state. So, what exactly is this specific state of mind and body, and why does spontaneous gong naturally emerge within it? To me, the answer is simple: Qigong is, at its core, a form of meditation. As I have mentioned in previous chapters, the biological essence of meditation is to allow the body to enter a sleep-like state while consciousness remains awake. This is achieved either by keeping the body still or by maintaining constant movement, whether uniform or slow. In Qigong, static practice, Jing Gong, keeps the body still, guiding it into a sleep-like state. Dynamic practice, Dong Gong, which involves slow movements, achieves the same effect. Once the body enters sleep, conscious control is handed over to the non-conscious brain. Whether this non-conscious brain maintains balance, or even initiates movement, is no longer under the control of the conscious mind. In other words, during spontaneous gong, every movement, sound, change in breathing, and surge of emotion originates entirely from the non-conscious brain, not the conscious one. There is nothing mysterious or alarming about this. In my view, the special state that gives rise to spontaneous gong is simply the meditative state itself, the state in which the body enters sleep while consciousness remains awake, marking the transition from the effortful world, governed by the conscious brain, to the effortless world, guided by the non-conscious brain. In fact, spontaneous movement can also occur in Zhan Zhuang, a standing still exercise. Zhan Zhuang practitioners often experience involuntary swaying, rotation, or trembling as energy flows freely through their bodies. Modern science interprets this as a deep relaxation response that involves autonomic nervous system regulation and neural discharge. From my perspective, however, the explanation is simpler. Zhanzhuang is, at its core, meditation, that is, meditation in a standing posture. As I have emphasized repeatedly, the key to meditation is not the posture itself, but the stillness that allows the body to enter a sleep-like state. Now we can return to the topic of Tai Chi. As I mentioned earlier, Tai Chi is also a form of meditation, meditation in motion. Beyond remaining still, one can enter meditation by moving slowly and steadily, allowing the body to enter a sleep-like state. Once the body is in this state, its movements are no longer directed by the conscious brain, but are entirely governed by the non-conscious brain. A new question naturally arises: during Tai Chi practice, does the conscious mind move the body, or does the body move on its own? That is an excellent question. In Tai Chi training, practitioners often experience the sensation of their bodies moving independently. But that sensation develops gradually through distinct stages. At the beginner stage, practitioners rely heavily on conscious control, carefully imitating forms of movement, exerting muscular effort, and practicing step by step. Their movements are deliberate, not spontaneous. At the intermediate stage, as the practitioner's skill deepens, their movements begin to feel smoother and more connected, as if their limbs are being guided by the flow of qi. The practitioners may feel that the movements are happening on their own, although they are still directed by intention, yi, and energy, qi, and are not entirely unconscious. Finally, at the advanced stage, Tai Chi enters the realm of Wu Wei, effortless action, or action through non-action. Practitioners' movements arise naturally without conscious planning. When an opponent moves, the practitioner's body responds spontaneously, as if instinctively. This represents a seamless fusion of reflex and intention. How, then, does this differ from spontaneous gong? In spontaneous gong, the body moves freely without conscious control, often in unstructured or unpredictable ways. In advanced Tai Chi, however, spontaneous movement emerges from extensive training. The actions remain consistent with Tai Chi's principles of softness, circularity, and unity. In other words, Tai Chi's self-moving is a natural outgrowth of disciplined practice, not random motion. What feels automatic is actually the effortless flow cultivated through long-term training. By now, the answer to our original question should be clear. Tai Chi is indeed meditation, a moving meditation that guides the body into a sleep-like state through slow, continuous movement. In that state, not only does the practitioner's body remain upright, but it can seem to move on its own. Once the conscious brain relinquishes control, the non-conscious brain, endowed with its own primitive awareness, takes over. It continues to execute the movements and sequences that were once consciously practiced thousands of times, but now with greater smoothness, continuity, and effortlessness. That is what we sometimes refer to as the flow state. Let me now summarize, and perhaps even redefine, meditation. From a biological perspective, meditation is a state in which the body transitions from being governed by the conscious brain to being governed by the non-conscious brain, while consciousness itself remains awake. The conscious brain includes the cerebral cortex, especially the neocortex, whereas the non-conscious brain includes the brainstem, cerebellum, spinal cord, and related structures. So how can we achieve the transition from control by the conscious brain to control by the non-conscious brain? There are several approaches. We can keep the body completely still, or we can maintain a constant pace of movement, whether through uniform linear motion or slow, deliberate motion. The reasons why these methods are effective have been discussed in detail in Chapter 7, Stillness and Motion, so I will not repeat them here. The most intriguing aspect of this transition is that once we enter the meditative state, the body can undergo a variety of transformations, some anticipated, and others quite surprising. First, if we remain still after entering meditation, the body may transition into deep sleep or even a hibernation-like state. This represents meditation in its narrow sense, the most common form. However, meditation also exists in broader forms. For example, spontaneous gong occurs when the body begins to move on its own after entering the meditative state. Walking and running meditation are additional examples. During long periods of steady walking or running, one may enter meditation, after which the body continues the motion automatically, sustained by its rhythm. Tai Chi, practiced with slow, flowing movements, is yet another form of broad meditation. Once the practitioner achieves meditative awareness during Tai Chi, the body completes movements automatically, the very sequences once deliberately practiced by the conscious brain. Whether one practices meditation in its narrow or its broad form, the essential condition remains the same. While consciousness stays awake, the body transitions to being governed by the non-conscious brain. In other words, one should be able to return to normal conscious control at any time during meditation. If that ability is lost, if one cannot regain conscious control at will, this is traditionally referred to as Zhou Huo energy deviation, or mental imbalance. Such loss of control can occur not only in esoteric or mystical practices, but also in more common, passive phenomena such as sleep paralysis or sleepwalking. There is one other possibility in meditation that few people consider: death within meditation, known as Huohua, sitting transformation. Death may be a taboo subject, but it is the ultimate reality for everyone. When the moment arrives, most of us wish to leave peacefully, serenely, without pain or fear. But how can we achieve that? Meditation provides the answer. Pain and fear originate in the nervous system. In deep meditation, most neural activity, especially sensory input, is greatly reduced or even temporarily shut down. Simultaneously, the sympathetic nervous system is suppressed, while the parasympathetic nervous system becomes highly active. The body shifts from fight or flight mode to rest and repair mode. Defenses fall away, and we enter an inner world of profound safety, warmth, tranquility, and harmony. In this state, we experience no pain, no fear, only an indescribable peace and serenity. In that sense, dying in meditation represents the most natural, humane, and blissful form of euthanasia, a perfect, joyful conclusion to a human life. So, what are you waiting for? To live more fully in the present, to age gracefully, and to eventually leave this world with peace in your heart, begin meditating now.